It's been a while since I uploaded a YouTube video, but I won't go into that here, so let's crack on. And yes, I'm back at this trading post after my failure to connect the Curse of Valentine to the Spiderweb mystery, and I'm kind of glad because there is something that I failed to point out in my previous video, and that is that this trading post has, for some reason, a magical lantern. This lantern comes on every night without any maintenance or interaction by anybody. Nobody comes down and turns it on. Nobody comes down and gives it any fuel. It just exists, which I'm taking it to mean that this is an indication that we're at the right trading post. Furthermore, my obsession with the ghost train led me to overlook what is the significance of this trading post, or in fact any trading post, but this one particularly. And the reason why I say this one particularly is because this trading post is in the best position. If you look at the other trading posts, I mean, yes, one of them appears to be for a quarry, so it seems to be very specific to that job. But the one at the very top of the map is in a very strange position. Usually, I'd expect a trading post to be connected to a waterway. After all, the trading posts would tend to buy in furs and pelts that would then be sold back to European customers. And in order to do that and to bring in goods easily, it helps to be on a body of water, whether it's a navigable river, a canal, or in this case, on the shores of the sea itself. And that's no small advantage. You see, if you're not by a river, that means you have to send goods over land in a wagon train, which risks banditry, leading to your goods being stolen or destroyed, and ultimately the failure of your business. There's also the risk of destruction just from accidents. As illustrated in the game, you lose a wheel off a wagon and it's a big bump, which can lead to destruction of delicate items. And if you're carrying dynamite, well, even more destruction, which is why even in Europe, before the railways, they were building canals, because it allowed the movement of heavy goods more easily and quicker than sending them over land. Obviously, if you're in a coastal area, say for instance Newcastle, that was a massive advantage as compared to being in Birmingham. In fact, Newcastle coal was probably the dominant coal fields in the UK at this time, purely because it was easy to get the coal onto ships. We have a phrase, coals to Newcastle, which is a way of saying, why would you send coal to Newcastle? They've got plenty. But it shows that Newcastle was a renowned coal exporting area. So that in effect was the primary purpose of the trading post, would be to provide goods generally in more remote areas outside the major cities and ports. However, they did have a secondary function of trading information. If you were a farmer or a hunter who dealt in furs, you wanted to have an idea of what you were going to get for particular products. And the only way to really find that out would be to go to the trading post. Obviously, if you were local to a town, you could go there instead. But the trading post was predominantly for people, like I say, not near major towns or cities. And of course, this gave the trading post a massive advantage in their negotiations. They could effectively tell people, oh, this is the price this week, this is the price next week. They could kind of make it up as they go along, as long as there wasn't a competitive trading post nearby or a local town. They could pretty much set the price. And you have to remember at this point, national newspapers weren't a thing, and this is mirrored in Red Dead, even different newspapers in different sections of a map. But before the railways, if you wanted, say, a copy of the Times and you lived in Yorkshire, England, you'd have to wait for a ship to bring it in, and that would take 2 or 3 days. So you're never going to get the information straight away. Obviously, the trains completely changed that, which is why newspapers used to print at such early hours, so they could get them on the trains to arrive in Yorkshire for 7, 8 a.m, so that everyone could have their newspapers first thing in the morning. So the trading post not only provided price information, it also provided national information as well as local information. So for instance, you might go to the trading post and hear another person saying, how I play wears a raspberry beret, and when it's warm he doesn't wear much more. But that's all you get. You don't know where he's wearing it. Is it on his head or is it on his head? How big is his organic hat stand? How does it hang? we want to know. None of these questions would be answered. Obviously, when the train comes along and we get journalists, you get to know all the juicy details, such as whether the beret was made of cotton or nylon. Now, you're probably thinking, what the hell does all this have to do with the spiderweb mystery? Well, it brings us back to that clue on the roof of a trading post. History is written by fools. Now, as I suggested in my previous video, I was putting it down to the media. Except, of course, when this trading post was operating, there wasn't really a media. Except there kind of was, but it's not what we'd think of as media. The media that would have existed before the railroads would best be summed up as bards. And you're probably thinking of Dungeons and Dragon bards, people running around with a lute. But that's not really what most bards were. For instance, the most famous bard is William Shakespeare. Don't believe he ever played a lute in his life. Not sure he even saw a lute in his life. And you probably wouldn't think that he was connected to the media, except he kind of was. For instance, his play of Richard III was in a way a historic tale about the reign, the terrible reign of Richard III. Was it accurate? No. No, that play was written to please Queen Elizabeth I, who was on the throne of England at the time. And so it was written for her to enjoy. And given that it was her grandfather who killed Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, he was under some pressure to paint a less than flattering picture of the individual, hence the hunchback. Although now that we've found the body of King Richard III, we might be able to tell if he was hunchback or not. But it's often been suggested that he wasn't, and that was a malignment by Shakespeare to please the Queen. So we see here how bards can be influenced and how the bards influence history. I'm guessing a lot of you are probably now even more confused as to why I brought this up. And the simple answer to that is, let's look at the map. And if we just look over here, you'll notice that the train line that the ghost train was pointing us down goes across a bridge called Bard's Crossing. And the interesting thing about this bridge is it's in a terrible position again. I don't believe that's by accident. If you look at the river, the widest place to cross is exactly where this bridge is. This river, as we've all done, is crossable so easily further up. In fact, at times it's less of a river, more of a stream. But at the point you've got this bridge, it's a massive chasm. You'd probably be best boating across before this bridge was built at that point. And so this bridge is a very embodiment of the phrase, history is written by fools. And I can't help but think that this is again a homage to the Donner Party. For those who don't know, you should probably watch The Shining. But the Donner Party was an infamous wagon train that came very unstuck, trying to get to California, I believe, and ended up in the enviable position of many of them turning to cannibalization to survive after many of the others in the party had died on the way. This whole situation was caused by them following the advice of a gentleman called Lansford Hastings, who was a migrant from Ohio, who was suggesting a shortcut, although I don't know how he could call it a shortcut when it was an extra 125 miles, around the Great Salt Lake. Interestingly, before the Donner Party had set off, Hastings had never actually traversed the route. And even when he did so without wagons in tow. So he never really gave it a practical attempt to see if it worked. So from that, I can deduce that the trail continues across the bridge. Once across the bridge, what do we find but